Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. A windy day on the south coast, plenty of snow in the interior. We'll check in on ferry cancellations, power outages, and some happy skiers to start the show. And the province has just made an announcement on cervical cancer screening. Now, this comes as cancer care and wait times face rising criticism in BC. We'll hear from BC United MLA Peter Millibar on demanding improved cancer care in Kamloops. After 12:30, we'll talk about that cervical cancer screening with a family doctor, and we'll take your calls. I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on the CBC News app on our website, cbc.ca/BC. You can watch us on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. It has been a windy day on the south coast and on Vancouver Island. This morning, BC Ferries canceled some sailings between Tsawwassen and Swartz Bay and Duke Point to Nanaimo. The 11th sailing was back on, though. Now, all of that was due to high winds and waves in the Salish Sea. Wind warnings are in place for West Vancouver Island, Greater Victoria, and the southern Gulf Islands. Now, to tell us about the sailing conditions right now, Deborah Marshall joins us from BC Ferries. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
What is the situation right now, Deborah?
Well, good news. The winds have subsided and we have resumed our service between Tsawwassen and Swartz Bay, as well as Tsawwassen and Duke Point. As you indicated, we did have some sailing cancellations this morning due to the high winds. They were about 70 to 90 kilometers per hour, but they have subsided, so that's great news.
And for those who were booked on those morning sailings, what is the advice for them then? Have they been able to book themselves for later sailings today?
Well, we were in consultation with meteorologists from Environment Canada yesterday, knowing the storm was coming in. So we proactively canceled the sailings between Tsawwassen and Duke Point. We did reach out to customers who had bookings, and they would have either been canceled or we would have booked them on a subsequent sailing if that was their preference.
Okay.
So hopefully all those customers are getting to where they want to go now that the winds have subsided and it's safe for service to resume.
And does that cause then any delays for passengers booked on subsequent sailings due to, or would they just take up empty spaces or free spaces if they were available?
Well, generally this time of year, we're not that busy midweek, and there were some minor overloads when the 11 o'clock sailings did go, but we should be able to pick up that slack in the schedule for the rest of the day with the capacity that we have.
And as you mentioned, the winds are subsiding this afternoon. Will there be any effect or impact on the way that ferry travel will happen? Should people be prepared for a little bit of a bumpier ride?
Well, we're not anticipating any further impact. And we do want our customers to know that we don't take the decision lightly to cancel sailings. We know people have places to go and appointments to keep and whatnot. When we do cancel, it is for the interest of safety. There is the potential to cause damage to vessels or berthing structures, and it can be quite uncomfortable for our customers. So good news is we're back in business.
Okay. Any thoughts about what may come in the coming days? We know that there is more inclement weather coming this week.
Right, there are more weather events going to happen in the forecast. Temperatures will be dropping and there might be snow in the forecast. Generally, snow does not affect our vessel operations, but we would caution customers traveling to and from the terminals, make sure you give yourself plenty of extra time because, there might be some slowdowns on the highways. Do check our current conditions before you head out is always a great idea, or you can follow us on X for any up-to-date information.
Okay. X, formerly known as Twitter, if people aren't keeping up on that. Deborah, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too. Deborah Marshall with BC Ferries. It's 12:10 now, 1:10 in the Mountain Time Zone. Meanwhile, power outages affected thousands of BC Hydro customers on Vancouver Island, the Gulf Islands, and the Sunshine Coast, as well as the Lower Mainland. Kevin Aquino is with BC Hydro. Good afternoon.
Hi, Michelle.
Thank you for joining us. How many residents and homes are still without power right now, Kevin?
Yeah, so our crews have made significant progress. Province-wide, we saw about 85,000 customers without power, and currently we're sitting at about 15,000 customers without power. The hardest hit areas right now are in the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island.
Okay, and so you've been able to work at it. I know this morning the word we were getting was that crews were still heading out there, but you've been able to make progress, it sounds like. So for people who still have their power out right now in the Lower Mainland, when do you expect power might be restored?
So our crews have been working around the clock. We do expect crew power to be restored later today or early this afternoon. It's difficult to predict how much damage a storm will cause and how long a power outage will last for. So that's why we always encourage customers to be prepared in the event that problems do arise. So that being said, our crews will, our goal is to get customers back up as quickly and safely as possible.
Okay, any timeline at all in mind, Kevin?
Yeah, so our crews are either en route or they're already on scene. Typically, in weather events like this, crews can be doing anything from taking a branch off a line, restringing wire, or conducting a full-on power pole. So depending on the damage, customers can be restored within the hour, or it might take a few hours.
And is the conclusion that this was due to wind then?
Yeah, so due to the wind, we did see customers endure some power outages. What typically happens is that sometimes trees or branches can come onto our infrastructure, causing power outages, and that would sometimes the trees or branches snap and then come into contact with our power lines, thus causing power outages.
Okay. And what's the plan for the rest of the week as we do expect lower temperatures and snow?
Yeah, so we are expecting the snow and the weather to drop. I would like to note that BC Hydro, we are a 24-hour operation. We do prepare for storm season year round, and our crews can activate storm response plans at a moment's notice. So that definitely enables us to ramp up our BC Hydro crews, contractor crews, and call center agents. I would also like to point out that we do have 55 offices spread throughout the province, so our crews are well positioned in the event that problems do arise.
And with 15,000 still without power in the Lower Mainland, mostly in the Lower Mainland, any tips for people who experience an extended period of a power outage?
Yeah, so we are seeing the majority of customers without power on Vancouver Island, actually, but it is difficult to predict how long a power outage will last for. So we always encourage customers to have an emergency kit with supplies that last for at least 72 hours. And customers should also know how to get a hold of us. And we could be reached out by calling our customer care line or reaching out to us on X.
Okay, Kevin, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Kevin Aquino is with BC Hydro. And yes, the arrival of snow can be a challenge for highway travel, but for so many who love to play in the snow, it can be the best thing about winter. So we're going to talk about that, the upside of the snow. In Prince George, members of the Caledonia Nordic Ski Club have been waiting for a snowfall. And Tuppy Hain is part of the head coaching team with the Caledonia Nordic Ski Club. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi, thanks for joining us. What's it like in Prince George right now?
So we are finally getting some natural snow, which is amazing, but it's been a long time coming. We had a little bit of snow early in November, but since then we've had really, it has looked a lot like October for the last couple of months.
And I see that you're warm and dry inside, but I imagine you're aching to get out there.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can sneak out of here a little bit early before we meet up with the team tonight so I can go and check out the trails ahead of time.
What has it been like for your ski team?
It's definitely been challenging to keep everybody feeling positive. We are fortunate that many of our athletes were able to attend either training camps or races in other parts of the province or in Alberta. So we have been chasing snow a little bit. We've been to Canmore, to Vernon, to Smithers, to Fort St. James to try and get some time on snow and get some race experience. But nobody really wants to be running in January when normally we'd be skiing. So it's been a challenge for sure.
And you actually also this past weekend traveled just 75 kilometers north to Bear Lake. Is that right?
Yeah. So we were lucky to have a solution that was a little bit closer to home for us.
Yeah.
And so fortunate too that our ski club was supportive of taking equipment out there and grooming a loop for not just our team, but for any skiers in the north who wanted to just get onto the snow.
What was that like to get out there? I know you've been to Alberta and other places as well. I imagine it's difficult when you're going to different places to train, but at least to be amid snow and being able to ski, what is that like?
It was so great. Our team was just so happy and the vibe was so great and everybody was just so pumped. We were out there skiing for over 2 hours and we couldn't have been happier.
Has it felt strange just so far this winter, Tuppy?
Yeah, it's hard to I coach skiing and I also my other job is to sell cross country ski equipment. So my winter definitely revolves around snow.
Right.
And when the snow is not here, it's kind of hard to be excited about winter. And snow are one of the main things that we stayed in Prince George for, and we love the change of seasons. So when we were stuck in an eternal fall, it was a bit of a bummer.
Here you are. You do have some snow right now. Will it make a difference? I know that Caledonia Nordic Club is hosting a number of events this winter. So will this be enough?
I think all of our organizing committee members are breathing a bit of a sigh of relief right now. So we've had quite a lot of snow come down in the last 24 hours, and it's also been cold enough that the snowmaking equipment is up and running. So I think our first event, we're hosting a BC Cup for biathlon, not this weekend, but the coming weekend. And then the weekend after that is our BC Cup for cross country. So it's looking really good for those two events. And then hopefully we'll be okay when we host the World here for World Para and Biathlon Championships later in the season.
And hopefully people get to use those cross-country skis that you sell.
Yeah, I think everybody is pretty eager. So normally as soon as the ground is white, people are out there. So I'm excited to see everybody out on the trails later today and tonight.
Nice to speak with you, Tuppy. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Tuppy Hain is part of the head coaching team with the Caledonia Nordic Ski Club in Prince George. It's now 12:18, 1:18 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today. I note, though, that for those traveling through the interior, the advice is to avoid traveling on the Coquihalla, the Okanagan Connector, and Highway 3 from Hope to Princeton due to that snow and wind. 20 to 30 centimeters of snow is expected for the Coquihalla today and tonight between Hope and Merritt, and travel is not advised on the entire Coquihalla Highway, the Okanagan Connector, and Highway 3 from Hope to Princeton due to snow and wind at this time. It's 12:18. This is BC Today here on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming as well. And last week we talked about decluttering and whether you are tackling any decluttering projects, clearing that out for the new year. And we wanted to read some of your emails. Joanne writes, for listeners wanting to archive slides, the Vancouver Public Library has a great digitizing department where you can reserve a computer and digitize your own slides, photos, etc. for free. Also, you can digitize old VHS videos from those 1980s weddings. Do you really want to do that? Thank you for that. Vivian writes, I'd like to share with you the following technique that works for me. SPACE, space. So sort, purge, assign a place for each item, containerize, use containers, equalize, regular cleaning, and decluttering. So SPACE is the acronym she likes to work with. And Jay writes, my tip is not so much about getting rid of clutter, but never having it to start with. Be judicious while shopping. Ask yourself if you really need the item, or can you borrow it or rent it. Thanks so much for your emails. It's bctoday@cbc.ca. In other news this morning, the big news from the BC government was an announcement of a new tool in cervical cancer screening. Now, a self-test kit that can be used at home was part of the announcement. This is a move away from relying solely on cytology tests collected by pap smears. We're going to take your calls on that in our next half hour with a GP who's a women's health expert, Dr. Miam Zeden. That's after 12:30. But first, today's announcement comes as the provincial government faces rising criticism over cancer care and long waits in BC. There have been a number of media reports of patients waiting months to get treatment for serious cancers. Joining us for more on this is Peter Millibar, BC United's opposition MLA for Kamloops North Thompson and the Shadow Minister for Finance. And good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thanks for having me on.
I know you have specific concerns there in Kamloops when it comes to cancer care, but first, what's your sense of the steps that the province has tried to take when it comes to trying to reduce the waits for getting treatment in BC?
Well, I think we have to be clear here. This is about reducing waits for tests, and that's certainly any time, especially with women's health, that we have better access and quicker access and more widespread, especially in the more rural and remote areas that maybe have higher rates of not having a doctor available. That's a good thing. But I think it does speak to the underlying shortage that we're seeing in terms of access to care across this province. And so really the big question now, and I note that the minister and the premier were unable to really definitively answer, is what happens once these tests come back and these women actually need access to treatment in a timely fashion. That seems to be a big area right now that we're sending people down to Bellingham. We can't even fill the spots there that we're contracting. And so that's really where we have huge concerns in and around what happened today.
And to tackle those wait lists, right, for treatment, in particular for breast cancer and prostate cancer, the province has sent hundreds of cancer patients to the United States at 2 locations there for treatment. The health minister, Adrian Dix, in previous interviews has stated they have hired 61 new cancer doctors, 28 new radiation therapists over the last year. Is there an ongoing shortage of doctors and specialists? We know that there's a shortage of GPs, for example. Is there just this overall ongoing human resources shortage that really is contributing to this?
Well, I think we have to look at why is there such a shortage in British Columbia comparative to the rest of the country. We used to be the leader in Canada when it came to cancer care and access to treatment, and times were the quickest in Canada for that turnaround. We're now at the bottom of the pile. And so something over the last 6 to 7 years has changed dramatically within British Columbia under the NDP's watch, whether they like it or not. That's the cold reality. And so, what people need is access to timely cancer treatments in British Columbia. We had the Premier announce, the former Premier Horgan in 2020 election announced cancer centers in Nanaimo and in Kamloops. We haven't even seen a business case for either of those, even though they were promised to be open by October of 2024. So we don't even have a shovel in the ground, let alone money approved in a budget for these centers. Brushed off today, your counterpart in Kamloops at CBC, Michelle Eliot, tried asking again today to get clarification on the status of the Kamloops Cancer Center, and the minister refused to answer. And this is, this is cancer treatment. This is not something that should be a political game to the premier or to the health minister trying to time announcements in an election year. Let's get on with it and get these centers built.
And that has been delayed, as you know, years after the original announcement. The province outlined a plan for that cancer care, specifically in Kamloops. Why do you think it has been delayed?
I'm not really sure. When Premier Horgan announced and said it would be built in 4 years, in the spring here, when the minister was here, he gave basically a 4-year from the time he was here for another springtime announcement.
For 2027.
When the doors would be open. And so, if they had the political will to get it done, they could be open. Instead, we're now hearing that instead of a 2027 date, it'll be late 2029 before we even see patients in these centers. Again, healthcare in BC is critically important to everyone, obviously. Cancer care, even more so. We don't have the luxury of time when you have a cancer diagnosis. So although today's announcement is great for women's health in terms of more access to more testing, there are the unintended consequences in terms of what happens in terms of turnaround to access to treatment once you actually have a diagnosis, and what happens about those women that might have had other questions or things needed testing when they went in for their PAP test that will not be happening. And so I think these are valid questions that have been raised today, and a shocking lack of detailed answer from both the Premier and the Minister.
How would BC United deal with the wait lists right now?
Well, I think first and foremost, you can't continue on as this Premier and Minister have done and try to downplay the seriousness of what we're seeing. The treatment option to the United States, to Bellingham, we supported that. We said it just showed very clearly how poorly our system has failed over the last while. But even that, the last time we FOI'd some documents showed that only 25% of the available spots we're actually getting patients sent down. So the government's not even filling the spots down in Bellingham that we have a contract for to help ease some of these wait times. And so, first and foremost, we have to acknowledge that there's a massive problem. We have to take a look and say, why is BC suddenly not as attractive to oncologists and to other cancer specialists as it once was? What do we need to do in terms of policy, in terms of structure of the organization to help support BC Cancer to get us back at the top of the heap in terms of outcomes and results and wait times in Canada as opposed to the bottom?
Can you accept or can you understand the challenge with recruitment right now that's just being exacerbated since the BC Liberals were in power and tried to promise a GP for every British Columbian, and that did not pan out. The British Columbians still struggle with finding a GP. So can you concede that there is certainly a shortage of doctors in general in British Columbia that the BC NDP government is struggling with?
There's absolutely a shortage, and there was a shortage when we were in government too, or we wouldn't have tried to make that commitment. The big difference is it's never been as bad as it is now. It's never been as bad as it is now. And again, if you're just looking at the deliverables in other provinces, certainly BC has a shortage. Other provinces have shortages. There's a worldwide shortage when you look at around the world and in North America. But BC is struggling worse than those other jurisdictions. And we have to be asking the hard questions why that is, that we are not as attractive of a place for doctors to set up their practice in and continuing their work. In Kamloops, we set up the Urgent Primary Care Center, the first one in British Columbia. The result of that was all of our walk-ins clinics have closed in Kamloops now. We don't have any walk-in clinics. And so, that again, instead of addressing those systemic issues, we have the Premier and the Health Minister doubling down on UPCCs around this province. And we're seeing in Vernon, all of their walk-in clinics are now closing. And it's happening across this province, despite warnings that this would be the outcome when they continue to advance these types of things. So they do have a large portion of ownership in why things are as bad as they are. We've never seen a percentage of our population without a family doctor, as we have now seen over the last few years.
When you say UPCC, urgent and primary care centers. We'll continue to watch the story, including the Kamloops Cancer Center as well, and any developments there. Peter Millibar, thank you for your time.
Great, thank you, anytime.
That is Peter Millibar, who's the BC United MLA for Kamloops North Thompson and that party's shadow minister for finance. And in our next half hour, we are going to take your calls on the announcement regarding cervical cancer screening. So this is a new program that's being launched by BC. The BC government is transitioning to test for cervical cancer through HPV screening, and patients will be able to provide samples from home and ultimately test less often if their results are negative. So transitioning to test kits that people can use at home rather than needing to see a healthcare professional to provide a pap smear test. So we're going to ask you about your experience with cervical cancer screening and treatment. That's coming up in our next half hour with family doctor, Dr. Miam Zeden, to take your calls. We'll go to your calls and Dr. Zeden in a couple of minutes.
Good afternoon. Winter conditions with strong winds and snow has brought treacherous driving and dangerous avalanche conditions in southern BC. Travel on mountain passes is not recommended with up to 20 centimeters of snow expected on sections of the Coquihalla and Highway 3. Avalanche Canada, meanwhile, has classified conditions as very dangerous for several mountain ranges. Meanwhile, BC hydro crews are busy today dealing with outages. There are currently about 15,000 customers affected, most of them on southern Vancouver Island and the southern Gulf Islands. And the Canada Energy Regulator will hear arguments this week for a change in Trans Mountain pipeline plans in order to avoid a 2-year delay in finishing the project. The corporation is set to address the regulator on Friday about its request to use different specifications for a stretch of the pipeline in BC after running into construction difficulties related to hard rock conditions. And now taking a look at the forecast, as I mentioned, extreme conditions continue with snowfall, winter storm, and wind warnings covering most of the province. On the north coast, mainly cloudy this afternoon with a high of 2, highs to -19 with snow in the Peace region. In the central interior, snow tapering off, then cloudy with a high of -5. Highs to -1 with snow and flurries in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, snow with a high of 0. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, showers this afternoon in some areas, windy with highs around 9. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
Let's see if I get to make a snow angel on Thursday.
Yeah, looks like it will probably happen.
Maybe a shallow one.
You'll have to post that on your Twitter account
yes,
when you do.
X.
Yes.
Rob.
Oh, sorry, X. Yes.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on our CBC News app, our website, cbc.ca/BC, and our YouTube page. Just search for CBC Vancouver. Very nice to be with you this afternoon. And for those of you just tuning in, we have been talking about an announcement from the BC government this morning. BC has just launched a province-wide screening program for cervical cancer. Here's Premier David Eby with the details.
Every year, about 200 people in our province face the terrifying diagnosis of cervical cancer. Anytime you get a cancer diagnosis for you, for your family, it's awful. And anytime we can prevent someone from facing that diagnosis, we're one step advanced in our goal of improving the health of the whole population of BC. And the good news is that the vast majority of cervical cancers, in fact, almost all cervical cancers, can be prevented. And our province, as you heard from the health minister, has been on the front lines of this fight against cervical cancer for many, many years. Here in BC, kids in grade 6 can get a vaccine that will prevent them from getting cervical cancer. They get it for free at school clinics. Encourage parents to make sure that your kids are taking advantage of that. It's important for women between the ages of 25 and 69 to get screened regularly for cervical cancer. Of course, lots of people reasonably make the decision to put off getting a Pap test. It's uncomfortable. If you live in a rural and remote area, maybe it means taking a day off of work and traveling or longer, making arrangements around work and kids to be able to visit a physician. It's a very intimate and personal test. And if people have had trauma or they just feel uncomfortable with it, it's too easy to say, I'll do it later. But this is how we prevent cervical cancer. And that's why, and many people don't have a family doctor. And so they're visiting a stranger to do this test. So for all of those reasons, scientists have been looking for ways that we can improve the diagnosis of HPV, which leads to cervical cancer, more easily and more effectively. We need to get rid of those barriers. And so putting all those pieces together, it's why I'm so excited today to join with these health leaders behind me and across the province in announcing Canada's first at-home self-screening program for cervical cancer. That's in the entire country. This program puts the power to prevent cervical cancer in the hands of ordinary British Columbians. It's quick, it's easy, it's more accurate than the traditional method of testing, and it's good for a longer period of time than a Pap test. We hope that this will encourage more and more people to get screened, whether by themselves at home or with a healthcare professional. And this will help us achieve our goal of eliminating cervical cancer in the province of British Columbia. Starting later this month, British Columbians will be able to order this test for themselves online. It'll be delivered to your home. You can do it at home by yourself or in partnership with a healthcare professional. You mail it in an envelope, and you get the results in a few weeks. And if your results are positive for a higher risk strain of HPV, you'll be connected to a network of clinicians across the province to support you in making sure that you do not face that cancer diagnosis.
That's BC Premier David Eby announcing this new cervical screening program. And we are taking your calls. If you have any questions about cervical cancer screening, if you want to share your own experience, you can give us a call. And if you have any thoughts about cancer screening and wait times in BC, you can let us know your experience as well. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, it's pound 690. And by email, you can reach us at bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining us for more on this is Dr. Miam Zeden, a family doctor with Ambleside Clinic, and she's also the founder and chair of Zeli Care, and that's a preventative health platform for mental and physical health. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Michelle. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. It's good to speak with you. What are your thoughts on this new screening program?
It's very exciting. We've been waiting for this for a very long time. I'm excited for patients that really don't want to have pap tests. And I'm really excited for the patients who actually don't have access to family doctors to be able to get screened.
How much of a barrier has it been to only rely on pap tests as screening for cervical care? Cervical cancer, rather.
It's always a challenge. You have to understand the sort of the conventional way of doing pap smears goes back to when stirrups were invented, where women have to put their feet in these very cold metal stirrups, and we have to put in a speculum and actually examine the vagina, find the cervix, and then take a swab and hope that we get enough cells to do the pap test in order to look for abnormal cells. So, having said all that, it's a fairly easy test for us family doctors and other practitioners to do, and it's not supposed to hurt. But if you come from any form of sexual trauma, or you really have a hard time with trusting healthcare providers, or have had any bad experiences, this is not a fun test to get done.
And so we heard that this morning, right, from speakers at the news conference as well, that there have been these barriers. If you have had experience with trauma, if there's discomfort, if you have discomfort with that process, if you don't have access to a healthcare provider who can provide this test as well. So how much will this alleviate that that barrier to access then?
I think it will alleviate by quite a bit. I just hope that the systems and protocols they put in place in order for patients to get the test, be able to send the test back, and then have the interpretation done in a way that the patients actually get the results and know what to do with the results, is what's going to really set this program apart from anything else. Everything sounds amazing at first, but it's more about how we create the systems and protocols in order for patients to actually get the results and know what to do with the results. It's like, Michelle, it's kind of like seeing, right now, a lot of people can have access to the lab results, but they don't know how to interpret it, right? So because there's no one to interpret it for them properly. So I really, really hope that this will also help the patients who have family doctors in a way that give them that comfort that they don't necessarily need to see their practitioners, but I urge them to still see their practitioners. I worry a little bit about that too, that the only reason a lot of patients would come to us to get their, to be seen was sometimes only for their pap tests, and now they may not come in and we may miss other things.
Okay, so that impact as well. Are there any risks with this particular test, with missing a potential high-risk case?
The HPV testing is very effective. So it picks up precancerous cells very well. The test is very easy. It's, you get a Q-tip pretty much. It looks like a Q-tip. And the procedure itself is super, super easy. And really, the whole idea is that this is actually even better than a pap test. But my worry is that, what if you have symptoms and you think, oh, I should just do a pap test or do a HPV testing, and then you don't actually come in for doing your other vaginal examinations if you have any vaginal issues. I think that's really important for patients to realize that, it doesn't take away everything else that's wrong with your vaginal area. So it's important to go to your practitioner, and I hope that British Columbians will have more and more access to more family doctors.
We're going to take a question right now from one of our callers, and I'll put the phone numbers out once again. If you have any questions about this new HPV screening program, screening for cervical cancer, you can give us a call and let us know what you think about it. We also have been talking about access to cancer screening and care. We heard from Peter Millibar in our last half hour. You can let us know what's been your experience too. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. My guest is family doctor, Dr. Miam Zeden. And Catherine is joining us from Bowen Island. Hi, Catherine. What did you want to add?
Hi,
share?
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks,
Sure.
Dr. Zeden. My question has to do with access to the results. Say you do choose to do your own at-home HPV screening and with a test kit. What I wanted to know was whether then you would be able to learn whether you are actually infected and which specific HPVs, because it's my understanding that with the HPV vaccination, which is not necessarily recommended to middle-aged women like I am, that it protects against 9 specific ones. So now if you were to find out from your test that actually you have not been exposed to any of those, then it might follow that you would choose to have the vaccine. So I guess that's my question, is really what you learn from the test kit, whether you've been exposed and whether you know which ones you were exposed to.
Okay, good question. Thank you. Will it be that specific?
Thank you for the question. Actually, I have those exact same questions. Unfortunately, we haven't been briefed about exactly what patients can and cannot see on their results. So that I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I would love to add to that I hope that the patients who do the home screening, and if they do have a family doctor, that the results actually go to the family doctor as well, so that the family doctor is in the loop, or whoever their healthcare provider is. But yes, those are, there's going to be guidelines around if you're positive, and if you're positive with a specific HPV, how the care actually goes forward, meaning, do we recommend vaccination? And now we do, for instance, when a HPV testing is positive versus your pap test, we sent you to a colposcopy. Now that's whole another issue in British Columbia, where we don't actually get timely colposcopies done for our patients. So that's another thing I would love for our Premier to address.
Okay.
And then after the colposcopy, where we've done a cervical biopsy, we get the more of the specifics, and that's where the recommendations will come if you need a vaccine or not.
Okay. Catherine, thank you very much. So it's still a bit of an outstanding question in the case of that, but I think you just answered my next question, which was, she was asking if you show as negative for those strains, could you then go get vaccinated?
Yeah, I mean, the vaccinations are really past a certain age. I think, at some point it was around 45 we were recommending But if you don't have any of those strains, and you've been with the same partner all your life, it really doesn't make sense to get the vaccine at that point. So yeah, it all depends on your situation, depends on your risk factors.
Okay. Jennifer is calling us now from Maple Ridge. Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for calling.
Oh, hi. I'm calling because one of the things that was interesting for me was I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and part of my treatment was tamoxifen. And I was told by the cancer agency that I would need to have PAPs every year, which was fine. But then when I called to make my annual PAP, it was explained to me that my doctor wouldn't actually get paid for the second PAP. They only get paid every 2 years for a PAP. So then I tried the cancer agency because they were the ones who recommended it,
Right.
and they wouldn't do it. And so I just found it really interesting as far as, women's health, and as far as here's something that's recommended, but doctors don't get paid. Of course, I had a really great family doctor who just did it without getting the proper fee. But, it's just one of those things where it probably just adds to why it's hard to get a family doctor when family doctors are doing things that are needed, but not getting paid properly for it.
Outside that fee system. Wow. And it sounds like you could have fallen between the cracks there.
Absolutely. And so I'm thinking like this thing where I can do it myself is going to help. Yeah.
To be able to do it from home.
Yeah, to be able to do it from home.
Okay.
So I think that's a good piece. And I don't know how your doctor will be able to comment on that, but I just wanted to share that, there's so many gaps in the system.
Yeah. Jennifer, thank you very much for your call. All the best to you.
Thank you.
And I can see Dr.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Zanadine shaking her head.
Thank you,
as you're
Jennifer.
listening.
I really appreciate her comment. And thank you for mentioning that. In fact, we family doctors have worked very, very hard in the last few years to change that system, especially when it comes to women's health. And we now have a new payment model where we actually get paid for our time. We get paid for the encounter and the complexity. And when it comes to pap smears and vaginal exams, it doesn't necessarily. Before, family doctors would only get paid the extra speculum fee if they were doing a pap test. So it didn't matter if you had anything else wrong with your vagina. If family doctors would actually lose money seeing females, and it is no longer the case, thankfully, under the new payment model.
Okay.
So we have been able to conquer that. So thank you, Jennifer.
And, you talked earlier about the timeliness of other procedures, what happens when you do have to move forward to the next test. And I think she was touching on that a little bit, the gaps in the system. We talked to Peter Millibar earlier in our last half hour about still yes, there's this announcement that he welcomed, but there are still long waits for treatment. How does this fit into the challenge that cancer care faces right now in BC?
Yeah, I think one of the problems is we want to celebrate every win, but we're also not addressing the big elephant in the room, which is our other cancer patients who are suffering, who don't get timely care. We have shortage in. And Peter Millibar was bang on when it comes to, a shortage in oncology, shortage in resources when it comes to imaging for our cancer patients. And our cancer patients feel, the minute you hear even the word cancer, you want your care to go as fast as possible.
Sure.
Because the unknown is so... It's such a scary place, and I feel for every patient that has to go through this, just not knowing and not having a plan in place. So if there is a way we can advocate for our patients, we will advocate for timely care. We've just gotten started.
Our next caller now is Meg, as we talk about this announcement from the BC government today about a new cervical cancer screening program, test kits that can be done at home. And this is a transition away from the current system of cytology tests taken during pap smears. And so the Premier and Health Minister this morning saying this should increase access to cervical cancer screening. We're taking your calls. What are your thoughts about that and about access to cancer treatment and screening in BC? Meg is joining us from Vancouver. Hi, Meg.
Hi, I just wanted to mention that not all people with uteruses and cervixes are women, and that I think this will really benefit people in the LGBTQ plus community, trans people and non-binary people who are maybe like really afraid to go into the doctor's office and be misgendered or be seen by people that don't understand how they're experiencing the world. And you know, I have kids. I have a trans kid and a non-binary kid, and both of them are younger, but have expressed already fear of, you know, that having to happen one day and not knowing if they would even do it because it's just too scary. So I think this is really awesome for people to be able to access at home, and I think we need to remember that it's not just for women.
Meg, thank you very much for the call. Dr. Zeden.
Absolutely. I think that's a very, very solid point to recognize that, you know, we have really in the conventional world of medicine put everything in a box, and sometimes we don't actually all fit in a box, and we have to be inclusive, and we have to find ways to make patients feel safe, whatever gender you have or associate with, a binary or a transgender. And I think we're going towards the right direction when it comes to particularly this very sort of uncomfortable way of getting tested when you're already not feeling safe.
Thanks again for the call, Meg. Lynn is up next now in Victoria with a question about this HPV screening. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Michelle. My point is, it seems to me as if we're focusing on the recipient of the HPV virus, which comes from genital warts, which generally comes from a penis. Is this vaccination and screening going to go to the male side of the spectrum, or just focus on the recipient of the virus, which is usually females?
Thank you, Lynn. Thoughts on that, Dr. Zeden?
Well, that's a very good point. We, in the past, when the HPV vaccine came, it was only for females, actually. And we made that argument, and now everyone's getting the vaccine. And, you know, ages, I think, years born 2005 and older. So anybody in grade 6 now will get the vaccine. So at some point, you know, we're hoping by I think, you know, the year was 2040, we can actually eliminate cervical cancer.
And so there will be presumably no need for this screening, or a declining need for this screening.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's thank you, Lynn. And also in Victoria, Yolanta is calling us with a comment on pap smear testing or the cervical cancer screening that's just been announced today. Hi, Yolanta.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. My comment was that as an unattached patient, I recently went to the urgent primary care center for a PAP, and I was really happy with the service, and they actually called me back a few years later for another PAP, which I just had last week. And I got to see a nurse. She did the PAP, but we also had a conversation about some lab tests, and I recently had a baby, so she chatted me about that, mental health things. It was really a lovely interaction, and as someone that doesn't have a family doctor, I don't really get to see a healthcare provider very often. So my concern is just that we're moving to this self-checkout type of healthcare, and there are some unappreciated benefits of seeing a live healthcare provider. So that's my comment, and I guess my question is, do you have to do the self-screening, or will those clinics still call you back to do an inpatient test, much like I've been offered by the urgent primary health center?
Really good question. I'm glad you had a good experience as well, Yolanta. Nice to hear that. This is something you touched on earlier, Dr. Zainadine, that there are other issues that a healthcare provider can look at, but also that, yes, that conversation she was able to have. Will everybody need to move then towards self-screening?
I think we need to advocate for patient choice, if anything. I think that's where the beauty of how to actually provide care comes, where the patient's really at the center and they get to decide. And I think, if you're feeling uncomfortable, yeah, of course you could do it at home. But some say, you know what, I'd like to see my family doctor, or I'd like to see my healthcare provider, or I would like to go to my clinic and get the nurse to do my pap smear, and we can do that. And that's what I hope is what it's going to look like. And I'm pretty sure it will look like that you will have a choice.
Okay, we'll try to find out more about that as well when it comes to whether this will be a transition or an added option, the primary option. It's a really good question. Thank you very much for raising that as well, Yolanta. I have about a minute left, but Monica in Vancouver, if you're able to be succinct, I'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this new screening?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I'm excited for the new screening. I recently had a pap smear that was very uncomfortable, painful. In fact, my GP let me know that there was a new pap test that she needed to use that was supposedly faster to get results, and that she wasn't allowed to use lube. But she didn't tell me that before she gave me the pap, and I was very shocked what was happening. And
I'm sorry.
I actually changed my doctor after that. Was very lucky. I found another doctor, which is amazing. And she said, no, in fact, there is another lube you can use. So I just feel like women, or when people with vaginas who go into the doctor's office, we never know what's going to happen to us. I've had paps in 51 for a long time, and suddenly I had this horrible experience. And I worry that, I'm happy about the new test, because if other people are having those kinds of experiences, why would you go?
Monica, I'm sorry that you did have that experience. Thank you for the call. I just have 45 seconds left. I'd love for a response from you, Dr. Zainadine.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, there are women that are going to feel extremely uncomfortable, especially when they're going into menopause, where they have starting to get vaginal dryness. There's lots of things we can do. And ultimately, if you're listening and you're a patient, advocate for yourself. That is the biggest thing I will tell you as a family doctor.
Really appreciate your joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Miam Zeden, family doctor with Ambleside Clinic. My thanks to Dr. Zainadine, also the founder and chair of Zealy Care, which is a preventative health platform for mental and physical health. That is it for our show. Thank you so much for all of your thoughtful calls. You can always email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And join us tomorrow when we'll talk about taking care of ourselves amid difficult news and current affairs. We'll talk about that tomorrow on BC Today. I'm Michelle Eliot. Have a great afternoon.